just watching the other children grow and being such a part of their life. I recommend to educators that want a good life balance if they have their own child. Family daycare is a great avenue to go down.
Hey Moreland, today I'm down in St Kilda for the Midsummer Pride March supporting the LGBTQ community. It's a beautiful day. I'm proud to be here representing Moreland, walking behind so many wonderful dedicated people. This march goes towards exactly what our values are. At Moreland, we're one community proudly diverse.
More pride! More pride! More pride!
More pride! More pride! More pride!
G'day guys, my name's Chris. I'm here from Moreland City Council just to show you a bit about this tractor and how it works and what we do and how we get around and cut all the grass on the ovals. How's that? Is that better? You want to play tag with the tractor? Your teachers would like that very much.
Goodbye! Bye! Goes through the gate. In 2009, Council began research and consultation to identify the key challenges in sport for women and girls within Moreland.
The review identified several issues.
There was a serious lack of female competition and teams.
Only 8% of participants using council sports grounds were female.
To address this inequality, Council introduced a policy to encourage clubs to be more inclusive of women, juniors, people with a disability and people from culturally diverse communities, or risk losing an allocation of a ground to a club that is being inclusive.
Female participation has now increased by 161% in Moreland.
West Coburg Football Club is proud to align with Moreland's policy.
This year we successfully launched the club's first ever under-12 girls footy team.
We're changing our club.
We're changing our culture.
I'm changing the game.
So I'm Claire Johnston and I'm an accredited cricket bat maker and the first female in the world. I learnt how to make cricket bats from Ian Cullen. There's a lot of bats out there for men and I felt that there was an opportunity there to actually work with women to make better bats and to actually make them for their style. So recently I was commissioned to make 5 cricket bats for the Pascoe Vale Headfield Cricket Club for their under-13s girls cricket team. And yeah, to see their faces when they were given the cricket bats was just brilliant. So what I'd really love to be able to do is to keep working with my local community, the local cricket clubs, particularly the women, and yeah, work to make great cricket bats.
My name's Leslie. I have been with Moreland Family Daycare as an educator for over 36 years, I think. Family Daycare is a wonderful organisation. We look after children in our own home, they blend in with the family and it's fantastic.
I love Family Daycare.
I can choose my own hours, very flexible. I've made wonderful friendships with lots of the families. I'm now looking after children of the children I used to care for. The children just growing and developing is a wonderful, wonderful experience for me every day. I'd recommend Family Daycare to anybody and everybody. Oh, where's my Scouty snuggle? Where's my Scouty snuggle? Can I have a Scouty snuggle? How's your tea party going?
My name's Hilary. I've been with Moreland Family Daycare for 8 months now and I absolutely love it. The main reason I started with Family Daycare was to be with my little one. Family Daycare is a small environment, so mostly I only have 4 children and it's in a home. Moreland have been really supportive of the whole thing and they helped me find children when I first started. There's so many benefits of working family daycare and becoming an educator. Working in your own home, flexible hours, also just watching the other children grow and being such a part of their life. I recommend to educators that want a good life balance if they have their own child. Family daycare is a great avenue to go down.
Hey Moreland, today I'm down in St Kilda for the Midsummer Pride March supporting the LGBTQ community. It's a beautiful day. I'm proud to be here representing Moreland, walking behind so many wonderful dedicated people. This march goes towards exactly what our values are. At Moreland, we're one community proudly diverse.
More pride! More pride! More pride! More pride! More pride! More pride!
G'day guys, my name's Chris. I'm here from Moreland City Council just to show you a bit about this tractor and how it works and what we do and how we get around and cut all the grass on the ovals.
Councillors, I believe we're right to go. Well, good evening councillors, members of the gallery and to our viewers live streaming tonight's meeting. My name is John Kavanagh and I am the Mayor of the City of Moreland, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to tonight's meeting, which is a council meeting to consider planning and related matters. Our meeting is being held on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people, and I wish to acknowledge them as the traditional owners. I'd like to pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and elders from other communities that might be with us this evening. I acknowledge that many Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have made Moreland home, and in doing so have contributed to the rich, positive diversity of this municipality. Members of the gallery, please note that this meeting is being recorded and web streamed live to Council's website and Facebook. This recording will also be available as video on demand. Gallery attendees are advised that they will be recorded during this meeting. Councillors, a reminder that in line with the adopted councillor conduct principles as outlined in the Code of Conduct, councillors should ensure that they conduct themselves in the meeting with integrity, impartially exercising their responsibility in the interests of the local community, and not properly seek to confer or advantage any person. This behaviour will support the principles of leadership and good governance that secures public confidence in the office of councillor. Members of the gallery, in the event of an emergency or disruption, we may be required to take emergency steps. If so, please follow the directions from council staff. Thank you for your understanding and cooperation. Councillors who are in attendance tonight, starting from my right, Councillor Sue Bolton, Councillor Anna-Olivia Carley-Hannon, Councillor Helen Davidson, Councillor Jess Dorney, the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Natalie Abood, and we have Councillor Alia Farnley, Councillor Dale Martin, Councillor Mark Riley, Councillor Lambros Tapanos, and Councillor Oscar Yildiz. Officers in attendance tonight, to my left, we have the Acting Group Manager of City Development, Narelle Jennings. We have Saskia Hunter, who is the Governance Officer. Beside her, the Manager of Property and Governance, Olivia Wright. And we have Planning Officers Robert Shatford, Vita Galanti and Chris Harries. Well, thank you very much. Now, I think we have a full attendance, councillors, so we don't have any apologies for tonight's meeting. Adoption of the minutes. Could I have a motion for the adoption of the minutes of the Planning and Related Matters meeting held on the 27th of June 2018? Moved by Councillor Farnley. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Davidson. Any discussion, Councillor? No. Councillor Davidson? Any other councillors? Being no discussion, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against, declare that carried. Now, councillors, are there any interests or conflicts of interest to declare? There being none, we'll move on. For those who are attending or tuning into the live streaming for the first time, I'll give you an outline as to how the meeting runs this evening. The relevant planner will introduce the officer's recommendations. Then I'll give objectors the opportunity to move to the lectern and to make their submission for up to 3 minutes. After this time, I'll give the applicant an opportunity to speak and also for up to 3 minutes. If you're making a submission, please state clearly your name and your street. You don't have to give your entire address. Please try to keep your viewpoints as to why you support or oppose the planning application. Please try not to repeat what earlier speakers have said and keep the discussion focused on relevant issues. If you are opposed to a planning application, it might be worth informing the meeting why you're opposed and suggest an alternative approach that might be able to satisfy your concerns. Please also use this opportunity to focus on your concerns rather than the details in the officer's report. As I indicated, there is a time limit of 3 minutes for each speaker, but as chairperson, I reserve the right to increase or reduce that time of the speaker. Now, the first matter that we're dealing to tonight is DED 4318. That's 1223 Melville Road, Brunswick West, amendment to the planning permit, MPS 1987 1A. I move to the officers to present the report. Would you like to represent the report, please?
Good evening, councillors and members of the public gallery. The application before council tonight is for an amendment to the planning permit to increase the number of practitioners at the existing medical centre from 4 to 8 and an associated reduction in car parking spaces, 12 spaces, by changes to conditions 3, 5 and 7 of the existing permit. The site is located in a general residential zone and consists of a site 488 square metres. The site is currently developed with a part single, part double storey brick building. The site is located opposite the Campbell Turnbull Library and is located on the edge of the Melville Road, Moreland Road neighbourhood activity centre in Pascoe Vale South. The site is in the general residential zone and has a development contribution plan overlay. The subject site presents a single-storey building to the Melville Road frontage, and there is designated bicycle parking within the front setback to the street. At the rear is an existing car park that is currently approved for 6 car spaces. As part of this application, the proposal is to increase the number of practitioners from the existing approved 4 to 8 practitioners. This would require an additional 12 car spaces. The proposal is to include an additional 2 spaces on site. The left slide shows the current endorsed car parking layout with 6, and on the right, the proposed car parking layout with 8 spaces, with 6 allocated to the practitioners and 2 car spaces allocated to patients. The application went to public notification, and the application received 52 objections and approximately 144 supporters. The key objector concerns were in regards to the lack of car parking, safety and traffic impacts. The key supporter message was that a medical centre is a valuable community asset, and the growth of the community means that there's a growing need for this community facility to expand. At the 25th of November 2015 Urban Planning Committee meeting, where a previous amendment was considered that increased the patron numbers from 2 to 4, there was a council resolution that further investigation of transport and traffic in the local area be undertaken. And to that account, the Strategic Transport Unit, they conducted additional traffic volume and speed counts, additional parking occupancy surveys, reviewed Victorian crash statistics, and discussed the asset conditions for pavements in the area. The Strategic Transport Unit concluded that the additional work showed that car parking and traffic conditions within the study area fall within the acceptable range of as detailed in the Moreland Integrated Transport Strategy 2010 to 2019, which is a reference document in the Moreland Planning Scheme at clause 2104. Council's traffic engineers reviewed the parking conditions on site and determined that the additional 2 car spaces that were being proposed were unsatisfactory and that they compromised the current parking situation and therefore did not support the 2 additional car spaces. As a result, the car parking waiver is in full of the 12 spaces, and based on the report that the Traffic Strategic Transport Unit had completed, were supportive of the full reduction, and the conditions in the recommendation contained at pages 3 to 5 address this by amending the said conditions 3, 5 and 7. Thank you very much. If you have any questions.
Thank you, Chris. We may hear a little bit later. Thank you for such a thorough presentation. Very much appreciated. All right, do we have any objectors or submitters that would like to speak? Thank you.
Thank you, councillors, for this opportunity to speak. You should all know me by now. My name is Angela and I live in Moreland. I've been a resident of Bonet Avenue for 25 years. I love the neighbourhood, the long-term friendships that we have made in our tiny street of 10 homes, and the many residents that live in the surrounding streets, many that have been there between 20 to 50 years. So I stand here tonight elected as their spokesperson because many are not able to come here. They either don't speak English, they're elderly, they're frail, they're sick or they're timid. But they wanted me to express some of their concerns, and I know you've received over 50 objections which have addressed a lot of these concerns, but I think I just want to put it in their words as much as I can to try not to take up too much of your time. But basically we are feeling like it's a bit of a deja vu. We've been here before. This business has requested a double in its operation with significant car parking reductions. It wasn't that long ago that this decision by the councillors, a few in this room, decided on the permit that was granted. And so we learnt to adapt to these conditions. Always not ideal, but we did. We learned to live with them. And we were happy that, we thought that we'd reached a business model that everyone assumed happy with. We were a bit disappointed when we learned that the reapplication had occurred via a courtesy letter in our letterbox with an offer of them, to contact them with any concerns. But on further investigation, we noticed that this a courtesy letter of intent was actually already an application into council. And so rather than spend time, contacting the applicants to try and find a resolution, we thought we have to go through the proper channels or we might miss our opportunity, hoping that we might have an opportunity in the process. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. We're not unreasonable people. We do want to come to some sort of an agreement. We want to live in harmony and we're willing to discuss things. So I'm going to use this platform as my opportunity to express to everyone that I didn't get a chance to before, how we feel and the reasons we object. First of all, I want to make it perfectly clear that we have nothing against the medical centre. We do not object to its services, to the practitioners, to the staff, to the patients. We do object to their request of the expansion and the reduction in the parking requirement. Why? Because it is double what they are wanting. The impact to affected residents is going to be double than what we're experiencing now. This permit of 8 practitioners on paper might sound not like much, but it's a huge request because we look at the excess demand that this business will bring and the turn of events that will carry on to the residents. The extra clientele and so forth, the traffic, the movements that are not accounted in your planning scheme. In turn, we are also concerned that this will now trigger their 8 to 8, 12-hour day, Monday to Saturday, operating hours, which until now we've been lucky that they haven't used to full capacity. For the reasons I do not know.
We're at 3 minutes, but I'll give you another 2 minutes
because
I know you're speaking on behalf of others.
So as this premises is located on the main activity centre, the spillover goes into the residents of the NZR zones. So we kind of know that this business is asking for the waiver and we don't know where we're going to be putting these extra cars, but are you aware that this business, I'm sure you are aware that this business already has a current waiver of 5, and to give them another 12, you're now going to give one business alone in this precinct a 17-car waiver. That is huge, okay? As councillors who we vote in to make decisions and fair and just for all, do you really want to set this precedent for future business development in neighbourhood centres? So I think I refer to your planning policies and your clauses and so forth. I've been trying to understand them, but the things that stick to mind are to ensure that the scale and character, the amenity, to ensure that discretionary uses do not unreasonably impact residential amenity. Well, I think they do, okay? Just even alone, when I look at the amenities, ensure that residential amenities is protected from significant changes to traffic conditions in local streets, including increasing car parking demands, noise, light, odour and so forth, disturbances associated with the hours of operation. So yes, we understand the community growing. We've got to get with the times. This is what is happening and the density and so forth. But we need to ensure a balance that doesn't affect us all negatively. It can affect our health and well-being, which is quite ironic. It has affected mine. Okay, so as residents, we ask Council to please protect us from proposals that can impact on our way of life. So we're asking you to consider the true cost, not measured in dollar amounts, but the long-term effects and the reality of granting this permit for the surrounding residents. We would like a compromise, and we were thinking of maybe only increasing this to 2 practitioners with a car parking reduction of 6. We also would have liked to see the reduction of hours because the fact that this is going to impact into our evening hours and weekends, which Saturday is the worst day for us. You know, we'd like to have our Saturdays to mow our lawns and do whatever we want, and there's cars everywhere we can't. I agree that they're not the only contributor, they are the main contributor, because when they're gone, a lot of the cars are gone too. So if we can reduce...
Just 30 seconds, Angela.
Find some to reduce their hours or some way that we can work around that it doesn't impact on our evening hours and our weekend, then we will be happy with that. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you very much for the way you presented it, Angela. Thank you. Any other person like to speak? Yes, do you want to speak? Sorry.
Jump up, please.
There we go. Hello.
Hi, my name is Jim. I live in Bono Avenue as well.
Yes.
I probably am going to reiterate some of the comments that have already been made, but the parking one is definitely something that we are very concerned about, as a lot of other neighbourhoods are. I know that the council hears a lot about that. I'm concerned about some of the analysis of the traffic study, etc., and thinking about some of the qualitative aspects of that. The diagram that was shown up there where the site is doesn't really highlight how the main dividing road, Melville Road, which has trams running down it and is a very busy street, is really a bit of a barrier for people to cross and to access that site. So what happens is most of the patients and most of the people that are accessing that centre are accessing it from the western side, which is where we are seeing pragmatically, a lot of the traffic problems. I think, during peak periods in particular, when Melville Road is really busy, that becomes an even greater factor. What else was I going to say? I've seen other medical centres in the area that have, are built on probably sites that are more suitable for a larger practice like this one is being proposed to grow to. I just question whether this site is appropriate for that kind of development. And maybe they should be looking for a more suitable site if they want a practice of that size. I think with the regulations that are in place to control this sort of thing, have council really considered the essence of what some of those regulations are and looked at some of the practical factors that are now being generated around that site or exist around that site when making these kind of considerations or recommendations. I will reiterate the weekend thing. I work 9 to 5, I work long hours, I work hard, I come home. My home is my sanctuary, and at the moment it's a car park on weekends. I will get up in the morning to go and do some exercise at a gym. When I come back to my house, I cannot park in my street. I have to park in McGregor Avenue. If I go out to a shop during a Saturday midday or something like that, immediately I drive out of my car space in front of my car. We can only fit one car in our driveway. Most houses in that area weren't really built for multiple cars. So the minute I drive out of my car space, someone else drives into it. So it's like, feels like I'm living in Manhattan. I think what I would have, there's probably no time to do this now, but I would urge councillors to go and visit sites like this in the peak periods when the problems really exist and the people that live in the surrounding areas are impacted by this kind of by you know what's being proposed before making decisions.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for your contribution. Would you like to go?
Good evening, everyone. My name's Tony Adamson. I'm becoming a regular here. I'm from 11 Irvine Crescent, so I live up the road. I guess I'm here tonight because one of my ongoing concerns is the parking issue. Now, I think we are at the early stage of this, but this area has been rezoned and there are a lot of changes happening. Now, as I have said to you before, we are not against development. Wish to be clear on that. What we are against is overdevelopment. And I guess one of our big concerns is the constant waiving of parking requirements. Now, in the last 2 or 3 years, we have had a number of developments on the corner of Cornwall and Moreland. We have had 72 apartments putting in. They were granted a waiving in parking requirements. Across the road directly from us, number 16 and number 14, in their initial plans were both granted waiving of parking requirements. Now we have the medical clinic down there also asking for a waiving of parking requirements. Now, I'm not a planner, I'm not a developer. I'm a resident. My actual life, I'm a school teacher. But I do ask the question, what are these requirements for? Why do we have these requirements? Why do we make businesses and developers address these requirements? And I'm guessing it's because we do not want to see the things that we enjoy about living in Brunswick being eroded. But I have to say, these last 4 developments have all been granted waiving of requirements. And when I look at some of the reasons there, I shake my head. Now, one of the things that was given in this one recently was that waiving of requirements, one of the things that will counterbalance this was the inclusion of 10 or 12 bike racks. Now, I've had a look at the Bureau of Statistics. The average age of people visiting GPs is 65 or above. I do not see how they will be riding to a GP clinic. I can say that the last few times that I visited a GP clinic, I was in no state to ride a bike. And as a father of 2 small children, I cannot get my kids to a GP on a bike. So I do really question that as being an argument that was given for waiving of the parking. My other concern I have is, and this is a broad issue, is that a precedent is being set here. That every one of these developments, every one of these applications where a waiving of parking is being given is making this common practice, making this acceptable, making this allowable. Now, I do need to stress, the people in this street are not business people. They are residents. They live there. The street where this doctor's surgery is on a block. If you walk around it, they are all houses. The last thing I would like to make is that there is also a doctor's surgery within 100 metres of this place. Recently, they have put in off-street parking and they've gone to considerable expense to do that. I urge you to have a look at it near the Red Rooster there. They have gone and done the right thing, and I do wonder why this competitive business is being given an advantage. So thank you for hearing me, but those were my main concerns.
Thank you very much, Tony. Thank you for the way in which you presented it. Anyone else? Yep. Good evening.
Good evening, councillors. My name's Ray Freeman, excuse my voice tonight. I'm a resident of McGregor Avenue. Just 2 points, if I may.
Yes.
I'd like to congratulate any business that can go from 2 to 4 to 8 people as such, but when you develop a business, you've got to make sure that your building is fit for purpose. And in this case, the building is also the parking environment around it. So I say when a business grows, it's got to be fit for purpose and find appropriate facilities. With the parking issue, it's not fit for purpose. My second point is the photos probably don't portray the steepness of the hill in Baker's Parade coming up to the road there. And I know as even walking, because I walk quite often up to the shops, but even when I have to drive up there, and you have to wait for the traffic that gets backed up on Melville Road or at the bottom before you can get through. That particular stretch of road which goes into the doctor's surgery parking is quite problematic because it is on a hill and it causes visibility issues. So I think that should be taken into account.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ray. Thanks for the way you presented. Brendan? Yeah.
Hi, Brendan O'Hanlon from Bonner Avenue. Look, I'd like to start by just reminding councillors that there were 50 objections to this proposal, and they were 50 objections from people living in the local area. They were not coming from, pre-formed, pre-signed letters of support that were solicited not just from local residents but also from people coming to the practice from well outside the local area. So I ask you to kind of weigh that up in thinking about the level of support and the level of objection to this proposal. I can't miss the opportunity of saying that we were, as a group of residents who'd been active in this process, disappointed by the fact that we didn't have an opportunity to meet with the applicant. That was canvassed and suggested as a positive step that might be taken, and to have that not acted upon, and we've heard some of the reasons for that, was disappointing. Perhaps more disappointing was the fact that we weren't even told that that process would not occur. But in talking about the substantive issues, we were here roughly 18 months ago, and as many of the previous speakers have indicated, there was a sense then that the proposal was an overdevelopment of a suburban house, a medical business on a suburban block. And I think you will have experienced many settings in which major redevelopments happened when you establish a practice of this size. I think council have a difficult balancing act to undertake here. We appreciate that there's increased density in the area, but with that comes a responsibility to look after, to some extent, or at least take into consideration, the impact of these developments on residents. And these are foreseeable problems. We can know that this practice is going to generate more traffic, more parking, that will also, with the availability of the extended hours, mean that there is going to be greater intrusion into our days. So not 6 o'clock, but at 8 o'clock there'll be business happening, and people coming home from work, like me, as Jim's explained, will have difficulty finding a spot. So I'd really like you to take that into account in making your decision. And I guess, as Angela's said, we're not opposed to the existence of a practice. We're opposed to the existence of a practice of this scale. And we'd like to propose basically that there be 2 additional practitioners added rather than the proposed 4, and that the hours of operation be restricted to 6 o'clock on a weekday and 1 o'clock on a Saturday.
Thank you very much, Brendan. Thank you very much. Are there any other objectors that would like to speak? Is there the applicant or a representative of the applicant here? Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you, councillors, for allowing me the opportunity to speak. My name is Dr. Arati Kuteris, and I speak on behalf of myself and Dr. Katrina Barson for Moreland West Medical Centre. We just have a few points we'd like to make, if I may. Moreland West Medical Centre has been a medical centre at its current address for over 30 years, from when Dr. Chong first established the practice as Moreland West Surgery, and it has been in continuous operation since then. Since taking over the practice in late 2014, we have grown from a 2-practitioner to a 4-practitioner permit. This has allowed us to employ more staff and expand our services offered to include a psychologist, psychiatrist, and a hypnotherapist. We seek to have same-day appointments with doctors wherever possible to service the medical needs of the growing community. We are an 8-practitioner. With an 8-practitioner permit, we can further add to the variety of services offered, and we would like to make it more of a multifunction centre with the addition of other therapies, as well as more doctor availability in the busy times, and that may not include all the time. Most of our patients are local, many of them young families who appreciate being able to take their sick children to the doctor in a timely fashion. With the 8-practitioner permit, we will be more likely to be able to grow with the growing community surrounding the centre. Many of our patients shop locally, and hence we feel that they will enhance trading in the area. This includes not only the local pharmacies, but food and personal care traders in the vicinity. Our patients see us as an extension of the Moreland Road, Melville Road shopping precinct. None of the objectors have been other local traders, and we imagine they realise the benefit of having a growing medical practice in their neighbourhood. Many of our patients arrive to the clinic through public transport as well as taxi, and we do have patients arriving through bicycle. Not all our patients are frail and elderly. We have 141 letters of support from people living within the Moreland City Council area. We did not do a door knock of the local residents in the immediate neighbourhood. Both the traffic report we have commissioned and the work of the Council's Transport Unit confirm that parking and traffic conditions in the area fall within the acceptable ranges as detailed in the Moreland Integrated Transport Strategy mentioned earlier, 2010 to 2019. We provide an essential service to the growing community. This is a local activity centre marked for growth and development, and we feel that we belong within it. We look forward to continuing to provide a quality service to the local residents. We look forward to increasing our range and accessibility of services, and we look forward to making use of the full current building that we have. We are not seeking to expand the footprint of the building. We just want to use the building in its current form to its maximum effect. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. All right, councillors, you have a question? Yeah. Yes. Your question is to the applicant.
Sorry.
To the applicant. Sorry, Doctor. Got a question for the applicant. Now, after this, councillors, you can ask a question if you like to either the applicant or our staff.
I was just wondering if you can explain how many staff work at the premises, like in addition to the medical practitioners.
At any one time, we have a nurse and we have 2 reception staff and we have a practice manager.
Thank you. Now, before the doctor leaves, would you like to ask the applicant the next question?
Doctor, at the moment, where are these people actually parking? Do you know?
Although we have 6 car parks at the back of the clinic, we actually, most of the time, as was seen in that photo that was shown earlier, we do actually fit 8 car parks, 8 cars at the back of the clinic. So most of the staff will park in the back of the centre, and occasionally staff will ride to the clinic as well. In fact, most days, one of the practitioners in particular will ride to the clinic.
Okay. Any other questions of the applicant, first of all? Thank you. You may sit down. Any questions of the objector or of any council officer, of the council officer? Yes. Thank you. You can sit down, Doctor. Yes, sir. Councillor Bolton.
To the council officer, just so that I can sort of understand the process, I'm aware that this application was called up for a vote for by the councillors, which I support that process, but usually there is a mediation, or my understanding from planning applications I've called up, there've often been mediation sessions or known as PADs. So I was just wondering if that's if something different happened in this circumstance.
All right, thank you. Chris, would you be able to answer that one, please?
Certainly. Given that the main issues raised by objections were car parking and traffic, no alternative positions were put forward by the objectors. The objectors were like, we don't want increased car parking, we don't want the extension of the medical centre, and it was believed that a consultation meeting would be beneficial because we're not able to negotiate any further outcome. So having a PID, it's not a compulsory, it's not part of the Planning Environment Act. Where council believe there are opportunities to have a negotiated outcome that will benefit both applicant and objectors, then we proceed with that process. In this case, it was felt that there was no room for negotiation, and therefore it was not necessary.
Thank you. Now, councillors, any other questions for the officer? Any questions for the objectors? All right, councillors, can I have a motion? Councillor Abood.
Yes, I would like to propose a slight amendment to the officer's recommendation.
Okay.
So the amendment that I'm putting is regarding point 6, which is that what would happen is between Monday and Friday from 8 a.m. until 6 p.m, there would be a maximum of 8 practitioners. On Monday to Friday from, I'll write it differently. So from Monday to Saturday from 6 till 8 p.m, there would be 4 practitioners, which is the current permit. And then the last one would be that, the second last one would be that, so point C, on Saturday from between the hours of 8 a.m. and 1 p.m, there would be 6 practitioners. Which that includes the current scenario, which I don't believe we can amend, which is for there to be 4 doctors Monday to Saturday from 8 a.m. until 8 p.m. So that wouldn't change. There would just be the extra 4 would only be there until 1 p.m. on Saturday, the extra 2 would only be there until 1 p.m. on Saturday. And then on Sunday, the business is closed, which is the scenario that we see now. And if I have a seconder, I'm happy to talk to that.
Okay, we'll just get it on the... we'll just finalise it on the screen first so we're all clear. Is B correct?
No.
B, I think, should say Monday to Friday, shouldn't it, or not?
B is just Saturday.
No. Currently, there are 4 doctors allowed to practice at the medical centre.
Yes.
Between the days of Monday and Saturday, from 8 a.m. until 8 p.m. What I am proposing is that there would be an additional 4 doctors allowed between the hours of 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. on Monday to Friday, and an additional 2 doctors between the hours of 8 a.m. and 1 p.m. on Saturday.
Okay. Yeah. So what happens on Saturday? I'm sorry, I'm just trying to clarify. What happens on Saturday between 1 and 6?
So what needs to happen is at point C, it needs to read 8 a.m. to 8 p.m, maximum 4 practitioners, Monday through Saturday. So it's at point C, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m, which is current. That's not changing.
I see.
Which we're not in a position to change a current permit. That's not what we're looking at. We're looking at the proposed amendment, which is to add another 4 doctors. I'm saying add another 4 doctors until 6 p.m. Monday to Friday and another 2 doctors until 1 p.m. on Saturday.
Okay.
Doesn't make sense.
Sorry. Maybe a suggestion would be at all other times for practitioners, essentially as part C.
Because A and C contradict one another the way it's written. It should be 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. and then it avoids contradictions because the first A goes to 8 a.m. to 6 and C would be then 6 p.m. to 8, which would then allow 8 practitioners in A and 4 practitioners in C. So it kind of follows logically. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you just have to amend Saturdays.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
The last C should be Monday to Friday.
Hang on, hang on, through the chair, hang on. Are we satisfied with what's written there?
Yes.
Okay, is that reading correct to you, Councillor Rowell?
It makes more sense. Is that what you're wanting, Natalie?
Let me just read it.
Okay.
8 a.m. to 6 p.m.
The mistake.
Is it?
8 doctors.
Yes. C should read Monday to Friday.
Yes.
No. Because there's a current permit from Monday to Saturday.
Right.
For 8 practitioners until 8 p.m.
Okay.
On Saturday as well.
That's right. It's all in the report.
Okay.
But then 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. is missing on Saturday.
Right, okay, can we go through the chair, please? Right, okay, we'll just pause for a second. Right, can anyone see an error in what's currently before us?
I would suggest that C reads, other than stated above, at all other times, a maximum of 4 practitioners, and then that will allow So if it's not in those stipulated times in A and B, then it's 4 practitioners.
Right, probably rather than all other times within the operation.
Yes.
Because otherwise they could have.
Or is that not?
No?
Sorry, just through the chair, it's a condition that is controlling both hours and now practitioner numbers, so it does need to deal with the hours of operation.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yes.
Sorry about this. This is why I tried to resolve this on Monday rather than doing it on the fly right now. What it would need to say is it would need to say the current permit, which is from Monday to Saturday from 8 a.m. until 4 p.m. there are 4 doctors. From Monday to Friday from 6 p.m. till 8 p.m. From 8 a.m.
Okay, I'm going to go to the acting manager.
Just through the chair, Part B could read Saturday 8 a.m. till 1 p.m. 6 practitioners and 1 p.m. till 6 p.m. 4 practitioners, and then C is deleted.
Except it's not 1 till 6, it's 1 till 8, which is the current permit.
Sorry, 1 till 8.
1 till 8, okay.
It could be 1 till 6 because then C comes 6 to 8.
I'm sorry?
It could be what you
Yes.
said.
Yep.
Because then C will cover
1 p.m. till 6
Saturday,
p.m.
6 to 8 as
Yep.
well.
That's correct.
Is that all right? So 1 p.m. to what? And also 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. So was it 4 practitioners? That was the intent. 4 practitioners.
Let's have a look at that.
And then C remains.
Okay, all right. I think we're clear on that now. Are you moving that, Councillor Bood?
Yeah, I'm just waiting for a second.
Okay, we'll have it now. I think everyone should be able to clear on that. Do you have a seconder? Are you happy to second? Councillor Martin to second. You may speak to it now.
Thank you. So the reason that just unfolded like that is because it's a complicated issue, right? What's happened is since Councillor Dorney and I met with the doctors and I called this into what was formerly called the Urban Planning Committee and now is council, the whole council. We call it Planning and Other Matters. I've met with the residents and I've also got a bit of history about the site, about the parking issues right across the city. We've adopted the draft version of the Moreland Integrated Transport Strategy, which has a parking strategy embedded inside it, which addresses what the whole city is experiencing, is that we all feel like Manhattan. Things are getting very tight. Things are getting very busy. There are already 140 people who rely on the doctor's surgery, and there are already a strong group of residents who are organised to mobilise and come and be available to come and talk about these issues. It's becoming tight. Now, while I've been having these conversations with the doctors and the residents, what I've ascertained is that the burning issues are Saturday morning. Now, currently, and the fear is about evenings and Saturday afternoons. Now, currently the doctor's surgery is trading until, even though they have a permit until 8 p.m, they're trading during the week until about 6 and on Friday and the weekends, on Saturday, until about 1 p.m. So I think that enabling the doctor's surgery to have the extra practitioners that they're after does a couple of things. It stops us going to VCAT again, potentially. It enables the practice to grow and service the community. We've got a scenario where I was under the impression that people go to the doctors during the week and take a medical certificate, but I suspect that quite a lot of people actually just soldier on, which is not necessarily the best thing, and they're going to the doctor on Saturday morning. Personally, from my perspective, having seen a counsellor, but not this type, the other type, riding a bike to those appointments is actually good for you. I visited the site, the car park was full of cars, the bicycle rack in the front yard did have bicycles at it, and Bonner Avenue had 4 cars parked in it, and I was informed that they are traders from the little shopping centre around the corner. I suspect that what we're doing by allowing this compromise is enabling people to work in the city, because we know the public transport doesn't really work to get people 11 k's into the city. We're strengthening the village, we're strengthening the pharmacy across the road. I've done quite a lot of research and I feel quite connected to
this particular issue, and I feel quite comfortable with this compromise. And I really can't stress enough how much parking is an issue, and everybody needs to make a submission to the integrated transport strategy, which is out for draft now.
Thank you. And the second is Councillor Martin. Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Martin?
Just briefly. So I have spent a little bit of time talking with some of the residents. I've also listened to the concerns raised by the business community wanting to actually increase, the amount of traders in the area. The traders in the area are quite happy with the increase in staff. They do believe that it will bring in that additional sort of trade to them. So in this role, we recognise that we are in a community that is growing rapidly. We're dealing with population pressures as a council, and one of those things is we have to stand here and realise, well, what is reasonable? What is a reasonable outcome here? 8 practitioners, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. isn't a reasonable solution in this case. And I do think that what Councillor Aboud has put forward is a reasonable issue, noting that I drove down the street the other day, there were plenty of car spots. The officer's report said that there were plenty of car spots, and I checked on Google Maps as well, and that also showed plenty of car spots. So for myself, in recognising that this is a mediated sort of version, I really think that this is something that is workable for all parties in a situation that we must recognise that we are growing and we have these pressures, and everyone has to give a little bit in this situation.
Are there any speakers against the motion? Are there any other? You are?
Yep.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do rise to speak against the motion. I do believe that this is an area in Brunswick West that does have some traffic problems and does have car parking problems. And doubling the practice for 4 to 8s is probably, without doubling or providing any additional car parking, for me is not acceptable. It's easy to say, and we've heard the mover and the seconder talk about, I think, Little Manhattan was managed, or car parking problems in the municipality. But the reason why we do have those problems, Mr. Mayor, is because councillors have sat around this chamber for a number of years saying, yes, I will grant this waiver. I think that is acceptable. I think it's okay. I think it's a compromise. And it happens on a monthly basis, And there's an cumulative impact. And I think when you do go there on Saturday, as many people have, or any other time of the week, you will notice that it's almost enough is enough. There is significant development, and we heard from the resident in Irvine Crescents. We are expecting that this area will grow hugely in the next couple of years. All of those applications will seek a waiver, I'm certain, of some sort. And there will be councillors here saying, yes, we do have a problem, but this one is acceptable, without looking at it from an accumulative perspective. So I think tonight we should stand up here and say, yes, it's a valuable resource for the community. The clinic is important and it is valued and we need to support it. But enabling a business to grow twofold, doubling, what kind of an impact does that occur to the local residents, to the vicinity, and is it appropriate? And I think when you consider it from a planning perspective, and only a planning perspective, and traffic management, traffic car parking, traffic waivers are planning matters, you would have to make the logical decision that this is probably not acceptable. So I'd like to foreshadow an alternative to refuse the application based on car parking if this motion moved is currently unsuccessful.
Okay, your foreshadowed motion is noted, and if this is defeated, we'll move to your foreshadowed motion. Are there any speakers in favour of the application? Any other speakers against the application? Councillor Bolton.
I've been toying with the idea of either amendment or speaking against the application. I've sort of heard from both parties in this dispute, but I also feel that a doubling in size of the business from 4 to 8 practitioners is too much, especially when you add in an extra 4 staff members in addition to the practitioners. I certainly think Councillor Wood is trying to go in the right direction of trying to find some sort of compromise, but I feel as if this is too large an expansion for the area. I gather that especially the information that was provided by one of the objectors earlier about, I think it was 4 developments recently approved in the area with a parking waiver. I'm sure there are a lot of patients who do travel to the clinic by public transport and by tram, but also I'm aware that there are a lot of patients who might come from other parts of Moreland but might come from not from the same public transport paths, and so they drive from places like Fawkner and Glenroy and Hadfield and so forth. And some of them do make up some of the letters of support. They've obviously built up a lot of respect for the doctors at this centre, but it means that it is unlikely probably that someone from Fawkner is going to catch the train, then the bus, then the tram down to the centre. So, I think the doubling in the size of the practice is too much for a residential area. I understand because the nearby school, primary school, has expanded in size, and so parking connected with primary school is now coming all the way down to the streets surrounding the medical centre. So, obviously there are big issues, but I think if we keep passing such massive waivers, I think there is going to be a big conflict in the local area.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Any other speakers in favour? Anyone again? In favour? You're in favour, Councillor Riley?
Yes, I'm just rising to speak in favour because I'm a little bit sort of concerned about the issue of trying to provide more parking, or at least objecting only on parking grounds. And I just want to speak briefly to the livability and alternative transport modes that we need to be encouraging. And I only speak to this not under our current integrated transport strategy, but with the one that we're looking to introduce beyond this year, which is out there for community input. So I'll be looking forward to everyone's input on that, particularly some of the speakers in this debate, because the whole thrust of the strategy is to try and address the issue of too many cars and not enough car parks, and I'm not hearing the solutions. However, I am wanting to encourage people to look at alternative transport to these sites other than the tram and bus and bike, that there are taxis and people can drop people off and pick them up. They don't all need to be parking there. I live just off Lygon Street, just near an activity centre, and I can assure you Lygon Street is bumper to bumper, Saturday and Sunday. It's not limited to just West Brunswick. This is a problem across our city, and that's why we're trying to introduce this strategy. So just coming back to this particular issue, the reason why we're trying to address these waivers and the right that was spoken to by one of the objectors is that we are trying to reverse that right to actually have to apply to seek an exemption, that you have to apply to seek to go above the in the new transport strategy. But I'm not going to keep going there. That's something that we debated in that consultation. So I think Councillor Boo's compromise is there. What we need to do as planners at this point is to seek acceptable outcomes, and unfortunately acceptable outcomes often do not meet people's ideals, and we have to end up doing this. It's not expanding the footprint of the property. It is mainly a traffic and parking issue that we're hearing about, and I think this is one way to try and address that.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Councillor Gildiz.
Look, I just want to say I know where the centre is because in 1988 I commenced, David was my doctor, so I commenced attending that doctor's surgery, and I did taekwondo with David, and I actually gave him his black belt. So I know the centre well. My entire family were going to that medical centre, so I know exactly where it is. I also have family and friends that live in that area, so there isn't a conflict there. But can I just say, I have met with the centre, and I understand your challenges in having so many doctors It is an area that's growing now, no doubt, and we do need doctors in that area. So there's nothing, and I think Brendan, Ray, Tony, Jim and Ange never mentioned anything about not agreeing with the surgery being there. It's going to provide a service to the residents there. You've got a massive development right next to Hall's Taekwondo. That's causing issues with parking. You've got a whole lot of shops just right next door to that unfortunately sometimes can't even park in front of there. You've got a library. Look, what I want to say is this. You've got Red Rooster just up the road.
No.
I'm thinking even having a discussion, you privately having a discussion with Red Rooster. I reckon what's going to happen tonight is, my predictions are that we will agree with the officers' report, because the officers have gone through and done a lot of study. I respect the opinion of Councillor Riley, but I don't accept the fact that you can rely on people riding a bike. My mum's 78, 79, she's not going to take a scooter from Coburg and go all the way down there to see a doctor. Not going to happen. To say that you're going to use public transport, I don't think that's fair on someone who's ill. I think Ray mentioned the fact that it's impossible to ride a bike when you're severely ill. And look, fair enough, you should probably go to the hospital. But in saying that, to say that you should use, a taxi or public transport or tram, or a bike, I don't buy that. But I think what needs to happen is we've got to find a compromise, and I think what Councillor Bird's put forward is at least something. I know that if we did decide to challenge this case and go to VCAT, I don't think we've got any chance of winning this. I really don't. 54 objections and 140 letters, and I think it was Brendan that made the comment that some of those letters, we don't know where they've come from. But let me just say this, I read the objections and there were a fair few objections. So it's not just these 6, 7 people here tonight, there are a number of people concerned. But councillors, it is our responsibility. We should have really handled this, not just this case, and I agree with the centre being there, by the way. It does provide a service. So great, good on you for doing what you're doing. But I think we need to really put our foot down on such developments. Give me 30 seconds.
15.
About ensuring that we really don't, whenever we make these decisions, officers, we don't factor in that someone's going to take public transport or a bike or fly in. It's just not going to happen. I mean, we really need to be a little bit more realistic. And again, I think where the biggest mistake we've made in this, I believe, is the fact that we've assumed that there's only going to be 8 doctors, a couple of staff. What happens in a couple of months' time if we end up with 12 extra staff? How do we mitigate that? How do we ensure that that doesn't happen? So can I just ask you to do this, please? I know, Doctor, no, you can't respond. Can I just ask you to do this? Can you please at least try and network or build a relationship with some of those organisations around you that potentially, there's a church around the corner from where you are, the church doesn't get used on a Saturday morning. Perhaps ask them for a relationship where you can actually use their car park.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Okay, are there any other people that wish to speak? Councillor Farnley.
I unfortunately don't know anyone at this medical centre. Was it Tony? Yes. Thank you. Tony, thank you for, and to all the objectors for coming up. One of my councillors a little earlier said that we have a really big problem with congestion and cars in our municipality, and he's absolutely right. But he said he's not hearing solutions, and that's just not fair. One of the solutions being talked about tonight is not allowing a doubling of the medical centre to make sure that a double amount of traffic won't come. So if you compromise and bring that down, then you won't have as much congestion. But the other point that sort of Tony spoke about is people aren't against development. They're just against overdevelopment. That's the frustration. And the upcoming Moreland Integrated Transport Strategy that was referenced a little earlier talks about the fact that should we allow development to occur with 0 car parks, with a complete waiver of car parks? And what will that do to congestion is a really good question, and something that I encourage all of the objectors here to get involved in, because it's the process of having your feedback closes in August. You can find a way to get engaged on the Moreland Council website, and I definitely encourage you to get engaged because this is your chance to give your feedback to councillors whether you support that. Now, I will be foreshadowing an alternative I think a compromise approach is appropriate here. I think the maximum of 6 instead of 8, so I'll be amending that to 6, and on Monday to Saturdays to maintain it at 4. So rather than allowing a complete doubling, I think allowing a compromised approach to 6, which was suggested by the objectors as a not a great outcome, but a livable outcome, given the circumstances, I think that's the right approach. This centre, I don't think, can handle a doubling of services. It is far too small, cramped behind a home. I think if the centre wants to double in size, it probably needs to find a more appropriate location for that. So foreshadowing an alternative where Monday to Friday it stays at 6 and on Saturday it goes to 4.
Thank you, Councillor. As it's the second foreshadowed, if this is unsuccessful, we'll go to Councillor Tapanos's motion first and then we'll go to yours, if that's unsuccessful. All right, thank you very much. Are there any other speakers? And then, would you like to speak to it, Councillor? Thank you.
Yeah, I've just been thrown by another
proposal.
Okay, I think I will speak against this one then. I do think that this would get up at VCAT, and I do think that we have to consider that sometimes that we do have to have some waiving of car spots. However, I recognise that this is a doubling of practitioners, and no, look, I don't know. I'm actually really stumped here. I don't know what to do.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. All right.
Great response.
Sorry. Okay, councillors, we're in a formal meeting. All right. Any other speakers? If not, I'll ask the mover if you'd like to close the debate, and if so, you have 2 minutes to do so.
Thank you. I'm not surprised that you're stumped, and we do better business when we all are able to attend the briefings and we know what's going on. So I'm not surprised. I'm very thrilled to hear some of my fellow councillors acknowledge the traffic and car parking problems, because I'm looking forward to hearing them think about and talk to the solutions that are being proposed in the Moreland Integrated Transport Strategy. And I agree that submissions need to be made about slowing traffic and restricting parking across the city. I am pleased to hear that the school has doubled in size. My kids are primary school age, so I know that I've contributed to that, although not at that particular school. And I think it's important to acknowledge that part of what the doctor's surgery is offering are children's services, which is an obvious solution to a potential scenario that's occurring in the city. I don't see this proposal that I've made in terms of the compromise as a doubling what is happening now. A doubling would be 8 doctors from 8 a.m. until 8 p.m, and that's not what I'm proposing at all. And so I'm really hoping that my fellow councillors will support this compromise, and that the residents in the city who've been impacted by these parking issues for more situations than just this particular practice will make submissions asking for restricted parking, the same as we are planning on rolling out in Brunswick, because your suburb of West Brunswick will be impacted upon when people can't park, same as they're driving down Melville Road because they can't drive down Lygon Street. So I feel completely comfortable about the compromise that I'm proposing.
Thank you, Councillor. That closes the debate. So, councillors, we're about to put the motion. It's a motion that was moved by Councillor Abood and seconded by Councillor Martin, and I think we're all clear on it. So I'll put the vote now. All those in favour? All those against? Declare that carried. I'll go to the officer now for the way forward.
Thank you, councillors. The Planning and Related Matters Committee have resolved to issue a notice of decision to amend a permit for the proposal at 1/223 Melville Road, as per the alternative motion put forward by Councillor Abood. As objectors, all parties will receive a copy of the notice of decision to amend the permit, and you will have 28 days to lodge an appeal with VCAT. To the applicant, you have 60 days in which to lodge an appeal with VCAT against any of the conditions imposed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, councillors, the next item we have is DED 4418, 96 Cumberland Road, Pascoe Vale, planning application MPS 217919. And I'll move to the officers to present to the report. Is that you, Robert Shatner? Yep, that's you again, Mr. Chris. Take your time. Two councillors who have left. Okay, here we go. Thank you, Chris. Whenever you're ready, please.
Good evening, councillors and members of the public gallery. The application before council tonight is for a development to construct a 3-storey building containing a retail premises, a medical centre and a dwelling, and a reduction in the standard car parking requirement at 96 Coburg Road, Pascoe Vale. The subject site is located in the commercial 1 zone and is 286 square metres. The site has a parking overlay, Schedule 1, and is subject to a development contribution plan overlay. The site is located within a local activity centre and is located directly opposite Pascoe Vale Primary School, which is located to the west. The site is also located on a Category 1 road zone, Cumberland Road, which is a Vic Roads road, and adjacent to Gaffney Street, also a Vic Roads road. The proposal is to construct a 3-storey building with ground floor retail, with a retail component of 201 square metres. The first floor will contain a medical centre with 2 practitioners. The second floor to contain a 2-bedroom dwelling. At the rear of the site will be 4 open car spaces. The requirement under the planning scheme is for 11 car spaces, and as only 4 are being provided, there is a reduction in car parking of 7 spaces. The application went out to public notification and 15 objections were received by council. The main concerns were regarding car parking and strain on existing car spaces, traffic safety in regards to pedestrian access for the school on the opposite side of the street, that the development was of too high a density for the local activity centre, and that waste management issues were unresolved. A planning information discussion was held, and Councillor Martin and Councillor Kavanagh were present, as well as objectors from the primary school and surrounding area. The recommendation contained on pages 24 to 28 of the agenda is that the recommendation for a notice of decision to grant the proposal be supported, and in regards to objective concerns regarding waste, a waste management plan will be required, detailing how waste will be collected from the site and separated depending on the different uses.
Thank you, Chris. Are there any objectors who wish to speak to this application? Are there any, is there the applicant or a representative of the applicant available? Thank you.
Thank you, councillors and Chair. I was actually expecting some objectors, so I might keep this quick. But in any instance, what I just really want to cover off is, firstly, thanks for the opportunity to present tonight. I won't take up too much time. In essence, we support the officer's recommendation for this proposal. We're of the view that it's a well-balanced, well-considered report that factors in the state planning framework and the various local policies relevant to this proposal. The locational benefits of developing a site in an activity centre and close to public transport and services and things are quite obvious. At a local level, your policy discussing built form outcomes and land use outcomes anticipates areas such as this will change, and in fact that's been identified in the officer's report. There are elements of the controls that talk about activity centres changing to a 3 and 4 storey environment, and with a 3-storey building proposed before you, that's obviously at the lower end of what's anticipated in that policy setting. The architecture is quite modest in terms of what it is, and it's a change from the existing streetscape, but there is development occurring in the area. And as I mentioned, it's sitting relatively low in respect of policy and whatnot. Moreland Council is quite progressive in terms of its sustainability endeavours and car parking considerations and whatnot. The current planning scheme policy sensibly supports reduced car parking rates in areas such as this. And whilst we understand the concern raised in the objections regarding the school and the traffic and congestion and whatnot, it's ultimately something that is beyond this proposal's control or our client's control. It is it's a broader traffic congestion issue associated with schools, and it's not just typical here, it's typical around Melbourne. But these congestion and traffic issues that schools experience are really flash points at a couple of peak periods in the day for half an hour, 1 hour maximum. So throughout the general day, our traffic studies indicated that there is adequate parking to deal with the mixed-use proposal. Council's traffic engineers have supported that waiver as well and that reduction as well. Not to mention in terms of car parking, if you're going to introduce additional car parks themselves, it doesn't get people away from that modal shift of shifting to sustainable transport. It just encourages this ongoing use of cars, which is really not where this city needs to go. And when I say city, I mean Melbourne, but also Moreland. Ultimately, as I've said, we agreed with the officer's recommendation, and we thank you for the opportunity and respectfully request that the decision be carried as recommended by your officers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No worries. Now, Councillor, you have a question for the applicant? Yes.
I was just wondering why you didn't consider a loading bay for delivery drivers, because I noticed the application makes reference to there being a 1 hour park outside the premises, but like, you know, if a delivery driver needs to deliver to one of the businesses and that site is occupied, then from a health and safety point of view, it's quite risky for drivers.
So there's been a change in the planning scheme in terms of loading. So there was previously a clause that provided a permit trigger for loading and whatnot. That's been removed. It's now just a decision guideline. So it's become, I guess, it's not a planning permit control. It's something secondary. Our traffic report that we submitted and was reviewed as part of the assessment details the loading component and notes that. Well, it was done at a time when you did need a permit under the clause in the planning scheme, but now it's not required. But it noted that given the retail tenancy is actually quite small in size, and that's the only use that would really generate significant loading, and the anticipation it would be used as a pharmacy, so you're not getting large bulk goods and things, and a small one, the area was able to accommodate that. I also note that there are existing uses there that also don't provide loading facilities. This is really swapping one retail use for another within a similar type footprint.
Thank you. Any other questions for either the applicant or council officer? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Any final chance for the officer? All right. Do I have a motion, councillors? Councillor Farley, you're moving the officer recommendation?
Yes.
Right. Councillor Farley is moving the officer recommendation. Do we have a seconder? Yeah, seconded by Councillor Yildiz. Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Farley?
I'll keep it brief. I'm quite satisfied with the way the council officers have laid this report out and made some compromises. In regards to this application, I'm happy to support the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Yildiz, would you wish to speak to it? Any other councillor like to speak either for or against the motion? Okay, being no further discussion, I'm going to put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. I'll go to the officer for the next steps forward.
Thank you, councillors. The Planning and Related Matters Committee have resolved to issue a notice of decision to grant a permit for the proposal at 96 Cumberland Road in accordance with the recommendation at page 24 to 28 of the agenda. The objectors and all parties will be receiving a copy of the notice of decision. And the objectors have 28 days to review and lodge with VCAT. The applicant has 60 days in which to lodge an appeal with VCAT against any of the conditions contained within the recommendation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chris. All right, the next item tonight, councillors, is DED 4518, 420 to 428 Sydney Road, Brunswick, amendment to the planning permit. Peter, are you presenting this one? Yes. And then when you're ready, and I've got to get it up on the screen. So.
Thank you, councillors. This is an application for an amendment to an existing licensed venue on Sydney Road in Brunswick, which is the Penny Black. The amendment seeks to increase the trading hours, including the sale and consumption of liquor on the premises from 1 a.m. to 2 a.m. on Friday and Saturdays. The site is in a commercial zone and it's part of the Brunswick Activity Centre. It's a highly mixed context with both commercial and residential uses occurring in the area. This is an image on screen showing the layout of the venue. There's an indoor area and a large outdoor beer garden. The liquor licence currently allows for the operation until 1 a.m. with a maximum capacity of 948 patrons. The proposal seeks to allow one additional hour of operation on Friday and Saturday nights, with music at this time limited to background music. The application attracted 11 objections, and the key issues raised in relation to were in relation to music and patron noise and antisocial behaviour. And there's a few other objections which I've listed on the screen for you as well. Recommended that a notice of decision to grant an amended planning permit be issued, subject to the new conditions which are shown in bold in tonight's agenda. And these conditions include that the increased hours are to occur internal to the building only, also requiring a venue and patron management plan to be endorsed to form part of the permit, and also requiring the installation of a music noise limiter to ensure that music noise at all times complies with the state environment protection policy for music noise. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. Thanks for the presentation. And do we have any objectors that would like to speak? Yes, please come to the lectern. Thank you.
My name is Jan Pardey and I live in Albert Street, and I've lived at that residence since 2000, so I've seen a lot in the last however many years. So I'm here also, so if I can have a little bit more time, that would be great, because I'm here on behalf of all of my neighbours.
That's fine. Considering the amount that are in the gallery, I think that's fine.
Many of which were the ones that sent in opposition. Our concern is not just the noise. Noise seems to take a precedence in this, although I noticed that there is a bit about the lack of amenity. But the noise from Penny Black on Friday night, it's not just the noise from Penny Black, especially on Friday nights, but also from the patrons that they attract. It's a booze venue. It's there to make money from the sale of alcohol, and that's my main concern, is that there's an hour extra of alcohol consumption from patrons that have, up to this time, caused quite a lot of loss to our amenity and really have no respect for the neighbourhood. They're walking the streets after closing time. They're talking loudly with rowdy behaviour. They're urinating on fences of private property. There's mayhem on Sydney Road when closing time happens and they all spill out. There's broken glass everywhere the next day, along with alcohol cans littering the streets. Another thing that concerns me greatly that's been brought to my attention is the gig list. So if you look at the gig list on their Penny Black Facebook page, you'll see, amongst many others, one from a person called Loud Music. and his gig is Debbie Does Gangbangs. So this is also a person that plays at Inflation in King Street, to give you some idea of the type of patrons that he attracts. And in light of the recent attacks and the murder of women in this area, I'm just wondering if that's really what council wants to attract to this and support to our area.
I understand the point, but we do have to do on the planning application more so than whether we, are supportive of
So Penny Black attracts a certain type of patronage that want to drink to excess. It's a great money maker, but not at the expense of residents who are Penny Black's neighbours, something which Penny Black seems to forget, and some of which have lived in the area long before Penny Black started. Now, I've got 3 different things that have come to me, emails and conversations from local people, local neighbours and shopkeepers. So some of the shopkeepers are talking about drunken women in underwear on Sunday mornings. While they have their customers shopping, and they're shopping with their families, so they've got a whole bunch of, a number of drunken women in scanty clothing on the streets. Cars that pull up and just empty rubbish onto the street, even though there's a rubbish bin. The next morning they're greeted when they open their shops to vomit and cans and bottles on the streets. There's also people alighting from taxis already drunk, throwing rubbish on the street. I think I've said that. And so Ian, one of my neighbours says she wants to say a few things to add to the antisocial behaviour and general decency of our area. I have witnessed people having intercourse in McIver Street at night. She didn't wish to photograph them. Human faeces more than once, and it's not dogs because dogs don't use toilet paper. Smashed bottles, public urination, all which supports what I've said. And then another neighbour wants to say that the site at 14 Frith Street, which is directly opposite Penny Black's beer garden, has just had a planning application for 45 dwellings in a 6-storey building, which is a further indication of the fast-changing nature of this neighbourhood, from industrial to residential, as encouraged and facilitated by council's policies. The rest of the large area around this is zoned for the same sort of development. Therefore, councillors may wish to reflect on whether the proposed conditions will do so sufficient to protect the amenity of the neighbourhood at a point in time that could, at once in a generation, could be a once-in-a-generation opportunity to ensure that Penny Black is immune to the complaints of the future. And a precedent is set on how these diverse land uses can be used for as good neighbours. Should all future dwellings be made more expensive in order to mitigate noise effects, he asks, or should the Penny Black make a little more effort on how to ensure that these imposts on future residents are unnecessary? Brunswick already has a housing affordability problem. Let's not make it worse unnecessarily. So basically I'm just saying that an extra hour of drinking is going to add more to this, and that is our major concern, is that we've got already a huge problem, a nasty problem, and I don't see why an extra hour of drinking is necessary.
Thank you very much, Jane. Thanks for putting it. Is there any other objector? You're the applicant? I'll just check. Any other objectors, please? Applicant or... Yep.
Thank you, councillors, for allowing me to speak. My name is Lawrence Dowd. I'm a Director of Colonial Leisure Group, the venue operators. First and foremost, we accept the officer's report. This is a very thorough, well-considered, balanced report, and we thank the officers for their hard work and diligence in this matter. We've worked closely with the planning officers to achieve an acceptable and satisfactory outcome. Whilst we acknowledge our property is located within a commercial one zone major activity centre, in order to achieve an appropriate balance between the operational needs of our venue and the amenity of the surrounding areas, we accept the following conditions and recommendations by the officers. An extension of our hours from 1 a.m. to 2 a.m. within the building only. We will amend the venue and patron management plan in accordance with the requirements specified in condition 27 in order to improve in order to improve the operational aspects of the venue. Currently, there's no such management plan applies to the premises. We'd also like the opportunity to play music inside the building until 2 a.m. The reason for this is because we will be compliant with SEPN 2, and we've also agreed to install a noise limiter. No music, including at background levels, will be played in the beer garden and outdoor areas after 1 a.m. We'll install a noise limiter in accordance with the condition 28, therefore ensuring compliance with SEPN 2. And finally, we will submit an acoustic report as required under condition 30. The above controls will no doubt ensure the amenity of the area is sufficiently and protected, and will ensure that we coexist peacefully with the Brunswick community. Thank you for the opportunity to address the committee, and I urge you to support the amendment.
Thank you for that questions. Any council have any questions for the applicant? I've got a question. How would you describe the current behaviour of patrons exiting Penny Black?
Oh, look, we had troubles, no doubt, a few years ago, and we've really had to clean up the venue a lot. We had some pretty bad people there, but we've been pretty strict. We've put in scan tech, basically scanning IDs to weed out the people. So if people were really bad, then they would get a life ban out of the venue, which we have no problem with doing. So it's really about installing sort of a sense of...
Can I ask how long you've been a director?
10 years.
Right.
Yeah.
And you'd say that the behaviour is much better now than, say, 3 years ago?
Oh, so, we own a number of venues across Australia. So for this venue, we've owned it for the last 4.5, 5 years now. So in that time, when we first took it over, it was very bad. Look, and no doubt there's always bad people that we'll come across on certain nights, but it doesn't help us to have a bad reputation in the area. So, I apologise that you've had some of those issues, but, we do everything we can to mitigate that with security, and we will have a more comprehensive venue management plan to mitigate it.
Okay. Any other councillors? Yes, Councillor.
Yeah. My question, thank you, is just to clarify how beneficial or useful is the venue forum that is being operated by the police and council, which is run, I believe, on a 6-monthly basis, whether you participate in that, and what benefits does that bring for you as a responsible sort of business in Moreland, and does that actually impact on your staff and the way you work or not? So I'm just kind of interested in how that, the forum I'm talking about, I'm not sure if I've got the right name.
Yeah, the forum with the police.
Yes, I think it's held on a 6-monthly basis.
Sure,
Can you just comment on that and whether it is useful and whether it actually helps? Because what I'm hearing from the objectors is it's not just the behaviour within the venue, it's actually the behaviours on the street afterwards.
Sure.
It's all about defecating, having sex, breaking bottles, pissing, spewing, and all of the other associated behaviours.
Sure.
And I've actually instigated some reports through officers about this, and I'm not terribly happy where it's come to. It's come back to that forum, and I need to know and to have some sort of reassurance about how useful that forum is in managing these broader issues.
Sure. It's a good question. I went to the last one. There's one actually tomorrow, I think. So they're pretty comprehensive, and I guess it's about everybody working together. And for example, that scan tech system, we put that in multiple venues down the strip. So we weed out people. They get life bans. They can't go in anywhere down the strip because we identify them. Other things we go through is about cleanliness and obviously alcohol and drugs, and how to make sure that we control patrons better. But it is very helpful. We had a senior constable there last time who worked at Crown Casino and other senior positions, talking about how to manage venues better and how to be on the front foot, and obviously practising RSA to a higher extent, and calling things before they get out of control. So all of those things, they're constant, and it definitely helps, and we're pretty active in it. We've got a new venue manager who's a female, and she's excellent. She's very conscious about women's safety too. There's obviously been a couple of issues there, but we're trying to, soften the venue and make sure that we're not seen as just a boozer, but better pub.
Can I just follow up with one more? No, and the other one is I'm just interested because I observe, and one of the objectors has already pointed out how much rubbish and stuff is on our street. This is another problem besides traffic, you've heard tonight, and parking, that the amount of rubbish and dumping on our streets, and I live not far from your venue, and I live up the other end, and I'm far enough away not to hear the noise from the venue, but I do see all of the other associated behaviours, and people walk past my front window at all hours. So I'm just curious about what sort of practices you have in place around going that extra step as a responsible citizen and business within Moreland to actually clearing up the area out beyond your little private piece of land, because many of the bottles and things end up out on our streets, whether people are meant to take them or not. They still get there, and I'm not sure if they're all coming. I'm sure they're not all coming from your venue, but it would be really good if the venues actually took a bit of extra, in my view, my personal view, took a bit of extra effort to actually clean up after themselves, particularly before the next onslaught the next morning, when it actually happens fairly quickly again between hours of the venue.
Sure. So what we do is we send out staff, and also staff do sort of like an emu walk. We go around the venue and within a radius of the venue to pick up rubbish after hours, and also security guards do walks around the area to make sure that no one's loitering around there and pre-drinking before they go in the venue. And that's where I think some of the rubbish may come from, when people pre-drink before going to the venue, which doesn't help us. So we try and push, control that as best we can. But no, definitely cleaning within the area, and if we want to extend that, we're happy to extend it further within a bigger radius after we close, so we actually pick up any rubbish that's left. So happy to.
Councillor Martin, you wanted to ask something?
I just had one question. So I used to live on Lob Street, which is directly behind. So I lived there for probably six or 7 years, and I obviously sort of can sympathise with the residents around some of the noise issues your venue caused, especially around public holidays in particular. Just wondering if you can outline what changes you've made from a management perspective to actually alleviate some of those concerns that residents have had, and I know that I experienced as well.
Sure. So what we do is we try and push people out of the venue before the actual closing time. So we might shut down certain areas and then slowly weed them out, so there's not a big push of people out into the street. There's now the nightlife, there's better transport basically. Before it was just taxis, but now there's actually a network there to get people and disperse them down Sydney Road, from Sydney Road. So it's much better than what it was, but that's something that we always make sure there's security, ample security. We can have up to 12 security on a Friday or Saturday night, so we over-index there to make sure that, obviously people are not going to get into fights or anything like that. So, it's a big thing for us to get people out of there as quickly as possible so they don't loiter. But,
All right, thank you very much indeed. All right, okay. And
Any question on the applicant?
Yeah, I do. I've done a bit of quick Googling on you, Laurie. Probably only your grandmother calls you Lawrence. I want to read this to you. We're honoured to be recognised as a real leader and united force in the Australian hospitality industry. So 2017, I'm hoping you still feel that way?
Sure.
Yeah, okay. So I'm imploring you, because this is it's a sexy area. Brunswick, everyone loves Brunswick. It's gentrifying. There are people still living in the neighbourhood. I'm guilty of all of those crimes that Jan has outlined quite some time ago, back in a previous life, and I know they happen, and I know they're a real thing. And we need to educate young people that there's a different way to exist. If you go to a nightclub in Lebanon, people drink 2 glasses of wine and that's it. There's no binge drinking and so I'm asking you if you can still make a commitment to be a real leader and a united force in hospitality in our city, because there's a real opportunity here to make things safer for women, to make streets more livable for people who live in them, and you're making all the right noises, and I'm just hoping that you can make a commitment.
Totally. Yeah, no, that's fair enough. I mean, you're right, that's a big statement, and, I'm a part owner at about 17 pubs across the country, so our reputation is everything.
Yep.
If we have a bad relationship with the police, with the councillors, with the local residents and everything, it just doesn't do us any good. So what we've gone here, we went for a very ambitious application a number of years ago, and it got knocked on the head, rightfully so. So I think we've really brought it right back. We're focusing it in the main building, and we're pushing people out into Sydney Road. So we're not going crazy here at all. And it's I hate to use the word compromise, but we have wound it back. But there's an absolute commitment there, and we want to make sure that we don't have a bad reputation with you guys, and we don't want to make the wrong decision. I guess it's got to be considered, and we'll do everything to make sure that we're good operators.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks. Okay, councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor O'Farnley.
Council Officer's recommendation.
Councillor O'Farnley is moving the Council Officer's recommendation. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Abu. Councillor O'Farnley would like to speak to it.
Yes, thank you. Thank you to the objector that spoke a little earlier. I don't think anybody around this table in supporting this motion makes excuses for the lewd behaviour of those youths engaging when they leave the venue. I think it's quite sad. So I don't think there's any excuses there. I think there certainly needs to be a clean up there. Now, in seeking a compromise here, the council officers have put forward a number of things, such as noise limiters, no music outside after 1 a.m, submission of acoustic reports and venue management plans, and those different requirements will serve to actually make sure that the extra hour the venue operates is contained as much as possible. The other point I will make is that for young people in Moreland, a lot of young people in Moreland actually go, if they want to go out, to Chapel Street in South Yarra or Bridge Road in Richmond, maybe Brunswick Street in Fitzroy, CBD. It's actually quite sad when you drive back to come home to see Sydney Road, Brunswick, Lygon Street all dead at those times. This is a great spot for youth to engage and have a nightlife. We spoke about broader issues. Another issue that's coming around, you'll hear a lot in the media, is a lot of youth now renting Airbnbs and having parties in residential areas. Just because, issues around getting access to local venues like this. I think this is a great spot for youth in Moreland to actually go to. I've been to this venue a number of times. I've been to a few other venues in Brunswick, but it just isn't at the same level that those premier nightlife districts in South Yarra and Bridge Road and CBD is at. And I think these are the spaces in terms of where in Moreland do we want to have a space for youth to have a nightlife. Sydney Road, Brunswick is that space. I don't think 2 a.m. is anywhere out of step in terms of opening hours. In fact, you'll find in South Yarra, Chapel Street, most of them are open till 4 a.m. And the same around, in Fitzroy and in CBD. So 1 extra hour is a good compromise, and especially with the additional controls and requirements, I think it delivers a fair outcome for everyone.
Thank you, Councillor Fowler. Councillor Bood?
Yep, I'm a business owner, so I'm happy to support the proposal. I can see the benefits of the report that's been prepared for us in terms of some of the detail that really tries to hone in on restricting scenarios where I agree it's completely tragic. And I look forward to watching the young people across the city reinvent the way they have a party. And also I look forward to business owners be successful maybe by, in the way of the Merri-bek group or something like that, where the establishments make a heap of money, but they're gorgeous, popular, and, they're classy places that people want to hang out and be classy. So I'm looking forward to some of this stuff, playing out and translating into the way people are behaving on the street. I'm really optimistic about it, and I hope that some of the details that we've got about bringing people inside early in the evening and really determining where people go and directing people and just sending a message about, the kind of stuff that you want to see as a business owner happen in your business, but also after people leave.
Thank you, Councillor Bood. Councillor Tapanoff.
I also rise to support the officer's recommendation as moved tonight. I do think Sydney Road is, as Councillor Farnley mentioned, or should be definitely, a premier spot that should be able to rival any one of those other night districts. And I guess one of the reasons why we haven't been able to do that in the past is because we've had some venues that haven't had a good management or good patron management systems. And that's led to a lot of problems in the city. So we've been a bit cautious about that. But what I like about this application in particular is those additional features to support the movement of patrons in and out of the venue. And I think that's going to go a long way. And I think significant improvements have been made. And I think venues like the Merri-bek are probably leading the charge there. I also believe an hour afterwards, and particularly when you look at the patronage of the Merri-bek, it's a big beer garden outdoor space, but the hour will be only indoors. Probably does go a long way to actually helping the movement of people by encouraging people to actually stay indoors in a quieter area and not put, a few hundred people out on the street at the same time. So I think when you have a look at the type of venues that we do have in the city, having an additional hour at the Penny Black, which is only indoors, is probably not going to produce any of the problems that we've had associated with some of the venues in the past. So I actually think it's quite positive. It will be positive in managing patrons. I think the additional requirements that have put in because of this permit go a long way to address some of those concerns as well. So from where I sit, I do only see positives in this application, and I think if whatever we can do to support the venue, being able to operate, extend its hours, and yes, make money in our city and bring people to our city is quite positive. And when we have venues that are willing to engage with us, like the Penny Black has, to eliminate some of those bad behaviours that are associated with alcohol venues, then that's something positive, and we should respond likewise. And I'm fully supportive of the additional hours.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other speakers, either for or against? Yes, Councillor Davidson.
I'm rising to speak against. The reason being is that I don't think that an additional hour of alcohol consumption is going to really help. I don't think that people consuming alcohol for another hour until 2 a.m. is going to fix those problems that we already know exist, that there's a police task force out there trying to remedy and trying to work with these clubs. I think it's great that we have a thriving Sydney Road and that the youth are engaging and socialising and interacting with each other, but that doesn't have to be based around alcohol. We've already got a huge problem in society now with Australians drinking to excess and all the flow-on effects that come from it. I know my fellow councillors say there's other ways to address this, but this is one way that I'm trying to address it now, and that's by not allowing this additional hour. As I said, I don't think anything better can come from it in terms of people's behaviour, how they respond to the neighbouring residents. I cannot see how this additional hour of alcohol consumption is going to benefit the community, the people, the individuals that are drinking the alcohol, and the residents. It's just not logical to me. So I'm sorry, I can't support it.
Thank you, Councillor Davidson. Councillor Riley, you'd like to speak to it?
Yeah, thank you. I'm rising to speak reluctantly in support of this, and I do so, Jan, knowing how, and the other neighbours I've met with you and shared concerns about this. Excuse me, a bit of a chest this evening. The issue for me is that 1 hour of extra alcohol consumption, while not necessarily a good thing, is I believe something that is manageable, particularly with the noise limiter that they've introduced, the log that will be accessible to the neighbours, the management of the venue and patrons to get them from outside in, and then once they're leaving the venue through various exits to go out onto Sydney Road. There's been quite a lot of potential improvements to this, and I think I'll be wanting to put a blowtorch on it in terms of where it goes if it succeeds tonight. I share concerns of Councillor Davidson around the consumption and the overuse of drugs and alcohol generally in our community, and look to working with her and others on the council about how we can promote alternative activities. I've been somebody in my youth who enjoyed going out late at night and partying till dawn, but I wasn't, sometimes I consumed alcohol and other times I've never been a great consumer of alcohol, but I did want to enjoy myself. So I think people are still going to find venues where they do this. I think 1 hour isn't going to actually necessarily change the face of the planet, and I don't think this is the way to manage it. I do think we need to be advocating and working with our state government around how we deal with venues generally and alcohol and drug consumption. So just briefly, there are 28 other licensed premises within half a kilometre of this site that operate beyond 11 p.m. 4 of those operate until 3. So this is not really going to change much in terms of the alcohol consumption behaviour, because literally those patients can leave there and go and drink for another hour or 2 hours currently, or an hour if this gets up. And 6 of those have 300 more patrons, so they're quite sizable. This is one of the largest venues we have in Sydney Road, so that's one of the reasons why I know there's a lot of concern, and I'm very concerned about the behaviours on the street afterwards and what we as a community can do about that. And I'd like to talk to Lawrence a bit more about how we can try and manage that. So I'm very reluctant. It is a difficult thing to weigh up, and often, as I've said here, we have to look for acceptable outcomes, and I'm reluctantly supporting this because I think the improvements that are being imposed in this case might actually help us monitor and keep the venue honest and try and bring some more of a community approach to how we manage it, whether we're residents in the mixed use zone or whether in the commercial zone like this venue. It's one of those places where there's a real rub against uses, and I appreciate the problems that brings. And we've got another food truck coming into the area park in the area as well, so there's going to be a lot more pressures on this area. And I know some of the residents have sold up and left recently because of the what's going on in the area, so it is impacting.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Dorney.
Yes, I also rise to support the officer's recommendations. I, along with Councillor Abood, attended the PID recently, and in that process light was shed on the stress and the disturbance and the loss of amenity that has been caused, that this venue has caused for residents locally. And I really, really empathise with that and what the residents experience. I walked away from that PID thinking that I wouldn't be here tonight supporting this application, actually. But since then, I want to commend the officers for their work in actually really addressing some of those key objections and concerns of the residents in a way that I think is going to benefit both the residents and the health and safety of patrons, both when in the venue and then beyond when they leave. The thought with those conditions, the thought of this being rejected, going to VCAT and being approved without those key conditions, I can't accept that. The key thing being the introduction, well, there's a lot of key things, but the introduction of the patron management plan, which is something that doesn't currently exist or in any kind of rigorous manner. So this is a measure of accountability for the venue to actually, as well as create some real strength for the residents to be able to address their concerns and have them aired and actioned by council. And I think that I'm really interested in seeing that document and seeing the proposals, as well as some of the additional measures around security that you spoke about tonight. They being the applicant I'm talking about. I think the closure of the beer garden and the outside areas really addresses and creates kind of a reasonable application in terms of the additional hour. I know it's not perfect, but I feel it is acceptable. The calibrated noise limiter, noise was a big concern, and that being actually implemented and a report needing to be generated and provided to council, I believe, on a regular basis, again, provides real accountability and actually addresses the noise concerns and makes sure that we're keeping it to the SEP N2 requirements. In response to people drinking alcohol and the safety concerns that come with that, I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned about that from a councillor perspective, but also as a woman myself. I work in the prevention of violence against women space as a health professional, and I am well aware of the sphere of influence that council has in this space. But in this context of this planning application, people, as Mark said, there's venues open until 3 a.m. People are still going to drink, people are still going to go. So we need go out and that is still existing within our community. So we need to be, which we are looking at addressing.
Time, Councillor.
So, yeah.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Any other speakers? Being no further... Yes? You're the mover, yes, so of course you can, yep. For 2 minutes, maximum of 2 minutes. Yeah, for closing.
One of my fellow councillors in speaking against this motion said, an additional hour of alcohol isn't going to help. Like, they must be really disconnected from young people because, like, somehow between 1 a.m. and 2 a.m.
Let's not make this a personal thing,
Yeah.
Ali.
Okay, Councillor King.
Why am I being interrupted?
That's right, you go ahead. But,
must be disconnected because here's the problem, right? Young people going out in Brunswick must be hooligans, doing drugs, drinking alcohol. I mean, the young people, I'm not young, I'm 29, but I like to think I'm a young person. I go out, I'm capable of having a good time without having to have so much alcohol and drugs and being a hooligan and doing all these things. You are able to have a good time with your friends out and about and not be characterised as a drunk, lewd person. Here's the thing with Penny Black. A lot of people that go to that venue have dinner in Brunswick, in Sydney Road beforehand at a whole range of restaurants. It actually attracts a lot of people outside of Moreland into the area. It does a lot of good things for that particular area because there aren't that many venues that has the capacity to hold that many people. So it's actually a good thing. I think young people are capable of having a good time without being drunks and lewds and hooligans and doing drugs and all those things. There is a small portion of people obviously doing a bad thing, and there's clear avenues of people them being stamped out in that area. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. That closes the debate. So we're putting the motion that's moved by Councillor Farley and seconded by Councillor Liu. All those in favour? All those against? Declare that carried. Ms. Grady?
Thank you. Council has determined to issue a notice of decision to grant an amended planning permit subject to the conditions of the recommendation. Following the issue of the decision, objectors will have receive a copy of the decision and will have 28 days to appeal that decision to the Victorian Civil and Administrative Tribunal. If no appeal is lodged, a planning permit will issue, and the applicant then has a further 60 days to appeal any conditions of the decision. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Okay. All right, we move on now, councillors, to DED 4618, which is 127 to 137, 139 and part of 149 Nicholson Street, Brunswick East, amendment to planning permit MPS 213 979A. I'll move to the officer to present the report. Is that you again, Ms. Grady? Thank you.
Thank you. So this is an application for an amendment to an existing permit on Nicholson Street in Brunswick East, known as the East Brunswick Village. Site is located between Nicholson Street and John Street, north of Glenlyon Road and south of Albert Street. The current approval comprises 7 buildings centred around a new main street, with the layout of the current approval shown on the screen. The site is zoned Commercial 1 and is affected by a development plan overlay. An amendment to the development plan was approved earlier this year, and the development plan sets out the preferred built form for the precinct and envisages a 6-storey form within the centre of the site, scaling down to lower heights at the precinct edges. The changes to the planning permit comprise 3 new buildings to the north of the site, which are shown as lots 8, 9 and 10 on the screen, and modifications to the form and layout of lots 3 and 4, and some minor changes to lots 1 and 2 to facilitate the addition of some 3-bedroom dwellings. The proposal will result in 152 additional dwellings, approximately 5,000 square metres of additional commercial floor space, an additional 397 car spaces and 263 bike spaces. Subject to the conditions of the recommendation, the proposal will be generally in accordance with the development plan, will achieve acceptable internal amenity, and will result in a positive architectural contribution to the precinct. It is therefore recommended that an amended planning permit be issued. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, now I don't think we have any objectors to this application because there are no third-party objection rights, and so we'll go straight to the applicant if you'd like to say a few words.
Thank you, councillors, and good evening. I want to basically touch base on some key points about the development. Councillors will be aware we attended a public information session, at which point the project architect, myself as a project planner and the project traffic engineer attended. There was a fairly low turnout, but essentially what we explained to the residents that we spoke to there and people that we have written to that came through the EBV website was that essentially this is a proposal about now incorporating what was the old laundry site, the Pacific Laundry site, and having the whole picture about EBV in one consolidated site. Councillors might be aware that we actually lodged a separate planning permit application for stage 3 quite some time back, but after many discussions with the council officers, it was agreed to combine it as an amendment application. We agreed to do that. And we took the opportunity in that amalgam of the application to tidy up some things in respect to lot 1 and 2. And the big change that we sought to make was to add some more 3-bedroom apartments. So what we did is we deviated from the 61-39 mix that was part of the old conditions. We said to council, we can't work with that. We want to put more 3-bedders in. That's what you want. Let's do that. So that's essentially what we've done. In terms of commercial offering on the stage 3 section of EBV, what we've done is proposed for lot 8 is an office development, and we're basing that office development on a co-work spaces. It's not your traditional office situation where people would rent small spaces, and there's the synergy of creating a lot of incubator type synergies with that. Lot 3, what we sought to do there is actually have a situation where we could bring some life into the rooftop areas. Just like all of EBV, there's a significant component of rooftop areas now. I've got a plan, if I may, just circulate it to you, because I have spoken about this before, but I didn't have the benefit of having a plan that I could explain, and it's probably going to make it easier for all concerned. I might start on that side. I've also
Yep.
put some links there. I apologise for those who got the black and white, but the message will still
Times are
be
tight, clearly, for the development industry.
Yeah.
Pretty tight.
Yes, we don't want to waste paper.
No, that's very true.
All right.
But
So-
it's still on paper, it's just not in colour. But anyway.
Keep going.
Please.
So what this plan shows you basically is the extent of landscaping, paving and urban design that's going into EBV, okay? You've got ground level treatments, you've got courtyards, you've got podium level treatments, levels on the 3rd floor and the roof levels, and you can see that there's an abundance of rooftop spaces provided within EBV. There's an abundance of pedestrian spaces that are free of cars within the plan. And that area that I've indicated as 4086 square metres, that's an acre of land that's devoted strictly to pedestrians and basically open space uses. So we've got a number of pedestrian linkages running through, and you'll be aware that we had much debate and discussion about the northernmost link between Nicholson Street and Elm Grove, where we've created a highly pedestrianised environment. So there's a lot to commend the commitment to green space. We've had the benefit of working with a chap you may know as Dan Palmer, who's the edible gardens expert, and the emphasis for EBV with the rooftop gardens and some of the planting in the ground floor is to move to a sustainable edible.
Just another minute, I think, if the maximum.
So, as part of the green element, that's it. In terms of what we're trying to do with this application, we're trying to essentially advance the construction of the car park as quickly as possible so that we can build the basis for moving forward towards the north as part of EBV. We've committed to 6.5 star average for EBV, and for a number of lots we have a commitment and condition requiring a 7.5 star average, which we've committed to and we don't oppose. I guess to be fair, the only sort of slight difference that we have is we would have liked to have put a roof over the outdoor areas within lots 3 and lot 1. And we note that the council condition requires that the roofs be taken off and kept in the pergola form. I've made my case to Councillor Riley when we had the public information session, suggesting to him that it would be a preference for that to happen. It would just assist with providing greater
I'm going to get you to
amenity
finish up.
at
now.
EBB.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Are there any questions for the applicant? Yes, Councillor Bolton.
Just wondering why you reduced the bedroom size of the 16 one-bedroom dwellings in Lot 1 to 46 square metres, and why not consider maybe removing a couple of the one-bedroom flats to make that more amenable space?
Yeah, fair question. We actually did remove a number of one-bedroom apartments within the lot mix at lots 1 and 2. There was an actual overall reduction in one-bedders, but some we couldn't configure. So some had to be slightly smaller. And on balance, we made the case to the officers that there's only a few. There's actually an overall reduction of both the one-bedders and the number of two-bedders within the scheme. So it's a bit of an offset trying to work within the existing envelope. So that's fundamentally the reason.
Thank you. Any further questions? Okay, yes.
Thank you for coming again. I'm just wondering if you think there's a realistic opportunity for someone to potentially purchase, say, a couple of one-bedrooms and turn them into a bigger dwelling. And even on a broader scale, I mean, the city's filling up with one-bedroom apartments and you need to sell this stuff, yeah? So I'm just wondering if that's been built into the plans?
The simple answer is yes. As I've said consistently at this meeting, the developers will not reject an application made by somebody to consolidate 2 units. That will happen. So we think that the demand is emerging, and we think that particularly in stage 2, which is the John Street end of EBV, that will be our primary focus. So stay tuned on that one, because EBV is yet to get started and it's evolving. So that change will be built in to the plans. I think you'll see that there'll be subsequent amendments for 3-bedroom accommodation as it grows. And we welcome that, councillors. We don't see it as an issue.
Thank you. And Councillor Riley.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Just thank you. Just there's been no major work done, I'm sure you're aware, on the Fleming Park refresh, and I'm just curious about any thoughts. And I know this is a massive project, so I don't expect you to have the answer on this. I probably should have approached you about this offline, but I just think in terms of the open space, and I'm really pleased to hear the comments you made about the open space and the activation of the open spaces and the eating areas and all sorts of things. It's kind of quite interesting for me, and also the rooftop treatments you're doing, the greening of the site, addressing urban heat island and so on and so on. So there's much about this is quite big and complex. But I'm just wondering if you've given any thought about how you might articulate that connection between your village, the new village that's coming, and our prime open space site, the Fleming Park. I mean, there's also there's another smaller park nearby, but the Fleming Park site, have you given any consideration of that?
Well, good question, actually. When we started with the development plan, which I might just get in front of you, when we started with the development plan, we started on the premise, councillor, that the existence of industry within the precinct actually created a barrier to connections through the precinct. So what the development plan actually did as a primary consideration is it reinstated a series of both east, west and north, south links within the plan. And the plan that you've got before you today is exactly a mirror of what the development plan says, which is up on the screen. Thank you. So what that plan does is it seeks to provide connections from Pier Street out to Elm Grove, in turn connecting to Albert Street, out to Fleming Park, and John Street being the primary connection north-south for pedestrians coming from Nicholson Street out west to John Street. So it was about, our response was about permeability, you see. There was never a requirement for EBV to provide a open space contribution. That was made clear as part of the original development plan, but our objective has always been to create spaces that people will stop, passive spaces where they'll stop and prop, is what I say, and provide connections to the existing open space network. And I think we've done that through the connection to Summer and Piers and John Street to Fleming Park, in a broader context, Councillor.
Thank you very much. All right, you best sit down. All right, do I have a motion, councillors? Councillor Riley. You're moving the officer recommendation? Councillor Riley moving the officer recommendation. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Tapanos. Councillor Riley, would you like to speak to it?
Look, I would just briefly, as I've already said, it's a very complex plan. It's a big plan, and I appreciate the efforts of taking this out to the community, which was over and above what was expected in terms of the overlay. I've got the right term. That's been provided for this site because it's such a massive site. It's probably the biggest one outside of Pentridge development in our city, so it's very big. So for that reason, for all the reasons I've already mentioned in my question to you, there are many things that you've been doing to address the development and to make it fit for what is needed in this city, which is less concrete and less tar and of much more greenery and more open space. So I'm really pleased about those elements and the water capture and all the other sort of ESD provisions that you're starting to look at. I hope you might even be able to go, as over time, as this rolls out, you might even be able to introduce some new technologies that will even up your environmental sustainable development, but I'm not requiring that tonight. I do want to just acknowledge that I want to thank those residents that came out on the 2nd of July, but can I just say on page 98, we didn't meet at Fleming Park, we actually met at Temple Park, and I think that was part of the reason why we got a fairly small turnout, and it was a very cold winter night. But and I just want to acknowledge that part B of the recommendation, and I would like to read this out just for the sake of people listening online, which is very brief, which says that we acknowledge that the informal notice and referral of applications to the Office of the Victorian Government Architect is required by previous Council Resolution Notice of Motion 9-17 will not occur for any future planning permit application in East Brunswick Village. This initially concerned me, and it doesn't prevent us from taking action in future, but it will still allow us to promote what's going on at this rather complicated and long drawn out development over time through our website and through the publicity, and I'm sure you'll be doing more of that as the proponent so that people are aware about what's going on, because we were very concerned with the nature and the size and the complication of this, that people would lose track of what's happening. Evidenced by the turnout, this obviously means that there's some connection there, I hope, that people are understanding. Perhaps not because it was a little bit too far away, the actual meeting room, but I do hope that residents will keep an eye on this. I know they will, because there are some very active residents in that area. But I just wanted to mention that that's not something that we're giving up. It's something that we were providing in addition to what was already required under the planning scheme, and we're just trying to ensure that our community is engaged and consulted and unaware of all of these complications as it's rolled out. So I just wanted to refer to that in terms of the motion, and the rest of it is read. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Councillor Tapanos?
Printed.
Very briefly, because I agree with everything that's been said, but just emphasise the extent of this development and the amount of work that's actually gone into this from officers and the applicants. And I do think that every time we do see this coming before the chamber, there are significant improvements. So I think that point needs to be made. So I'm really looking forward to actually seeing these dwellings and supermarket and shopping precinct and a real place really in that part of our city being developed. And I'm really looking forward to seeing the great outcomes, and I think it will be a bit of a model for other developers as well about what really you could build if you put your mind to it.
Excellent. And Councillor Aboud?
Yes, I'd like to concur with the mover and the seconder of this application, and I'd like to commend the work, because I agree wholeheartedly that every time it comes back to us it has more of what we're seeing that's successful in the rest of the city and more of what we think is marketable and adds value to the development. So I love the fact that I've been handed this picture with all of this green on it, because it's really an important, realistic thing that we need to see when we're building a bit of a concrete jungle. We know that placemaking involves green spaces as well. It's the only way the whole thing can work. And I love every time this comes back to us, noticing that there's one more, wooden panel or just some consideration about what is going to make this whole thing a legacy and a success for the city and for people to live in. So I'm happy to support this again.
Clearly you've got a coloured version. Sorry, Councillor.
Thank you, and I'll be brief. I also want to just rise to thank the officers for their work on this project. I know that there's a lot of negotiating and a lot of work has gone into this. I'd also like to thank the applicant for further amending this in the vision that we want to see for our city. I note that there's now 3 bedrooms, or a greater number of 3 bedrooms, which is really positive, and I do implore you to continue increasing that number, because we don't just have people who can occupy a single bedroom. We do have families that may want to move into this type of living. I also really thank the applicant for putting forward some 7.5 star buildings, and again, encourage you to really try and exceed that. One of the things that we're doing here on council is working on a design excellence scorecard, and looking at things like green roofs, and looking at some of your roofs here, it looks like you may have even 60 or 70% of some of your roofs covered in green space, which is a really fantastic achievement. And so you should be recognised and commended for including that in the application, and also would ask that you consider retrospectively applying for a design excellence scorecard when it comes out. If you do have 1 or 2 particular buildings which you do think really do exceed on the ESD front, and I really encourage you to keep pushing on that front. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other speakers? Being no further speakers, I'm going to put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. We'll move to the officer.
Thank you. So council has just determined to issue a amended planning permit subject to the conditions contained in the recommendation, and with the addition of a part B to the recommendation as well. The applicant will receive a copy of the decision and will have 60 days to appeal any of the conditions at the Victorian Civil and Administrative Tribunal.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Before we conclude business tonight, councillors, just before we finish, I'd like to make note that this is the last of these committee members' meetings that Narelle will be acting group manager, and just congratulate her on her work over the last few months in the absence. So thank you for your work, Narelle. It's been exemplary. And so that concludes business tonight. So councillors, members of the gallery and viewers live streaming at home, thank you for your attendance and your interest, and I'll declare the meeting closed at 8:40.
Hey Moreland, today I'm down in St Kilda for the Midsummer Pride March supporting the LGBTQ community. It's a beautiful day. I'm proud to be here representing Moreland, walking behind so many wonderful dedicated people. This march goes towards exactly what our values are. At Moreland, we're one community proudly diverse.
More pride! More pride! More pride! More pride! More pride! More pride!
G'day guys, my name's Chris.